To send an invoice to a customer for completed work that they requested, first go to the list of closed maintenance requests. Then locate the request for which you want to create an invoice in the list of closed requests. Once you've located the request for which you want to create an invoice, then look to the right until you find a small button. Clicking on that button will take you to the work order which you created for the request. Find the Generate Invoice button at the bottom of the work order screen. Once you click on the Generate Invoice button, you'll be taken to the following screen where you create the invoice you are sending to the customer. Please note that if you've made a change to the invoice here, such as markup or the addition of a tax, and it doesn't seem to be reflecting on other parts of the invoice, try clicking on the Save button to see if that corrects the problem. This screen lets you view all the details for the invoice you're sending to the customer. You can view the information for the customer to whom you're sending the invoice, the details of the work order for the work the customer requested, and the total costs included in the invoice using the customer, work order, and invoice total amount options, respectively. If Customer is selected, the details for the customer to whom you are sending the invoice are shown. You can select the terms of payment from the Terms drop-down box above the customer notes. If Work Order is selected, the details of the work order issued to perform the maintenance requested by the customer are shown. If Invoice Total Amount is selected, then the total cost for the work plus materials is shown, as well as any discounts, taxes, and other charges added on. Here you can apply discounts to the cost of the invoice, as well as taxes and other charges. As you can see, the discounts to the taxable items on the invoice and the non-taxable ones are entered separately. You can then add any sales tax, goods and services tax, and value-added tax to the total cost of the taxable items in the invoice. You can also enter any other charges, either as a percentage or a particular amount. You can also view the materials, replacement parts, the other ad hoc items used in the maintenance, as well as the labor costs and all of the subtotals for these items using the materials, replacement parts, other items, labor, and subtotals options, respectively. Selecting the materials option shows you all the materials used in the work order. For each material shown in the list, the name of the material is shown along with the quantity that was used and the cost per unit. You can also mark up each material used in the maintenance by either a percentage or a given amount. Under the Markup option column, click in one of the small circles called Percentage or Amount to mark up by a percentage or a particular amount, respectively. Then, depending on what you selected, type in the percentage or the amount in the appropriate box under the Markup column. Notice that the change will be reflected in the amount shown for that item in the Price column. If you already entered a markup when you entered the item into your inventory, that markup amount is used here automatically. You can also choose which of these materials are taxable by checking those items' corresponding boxes under the Taxable column. Checking the box for an item means that the tax rate you entered under the Invoice Total Amount section will be applied to the item. Selecting the Replacement Parts option shows you all of the replacement parts used in the work order. As with the materials, here the name of the replacement part is shown, along with the quantity that was used and the cost per unit. You can also mark up the cost of the part if you'd like, and mark it as a taxable item. Selecting the Other Items option shows you all of the other ad hoc items on the work order. Again, each item here is shown with the quantity and the cost, and you can mark up each item or mark it as taxable. Selecting the Labor option shows you the details for the labor costs on the work order, the number of labor hours worked, the total labor cost, and the markup on the labor. As with previous costs on the invoice, you can also add a markup to the labor and mark it as taxable. Selecting the Subtotals option shows you all of the subtotals for the invoice and breaks each part into the amounts that are taxable and non-taxable. Now, to send the invoice to the customer for whom you performed the work, click on the To Customer checkbox and save the invoice by clicking on the Save button. The invoice will now be viewable to the customer when they log on to EasyMWeb, and they can print out the invoice.